And this was your first time having the opportunity to work with Director X, right?
Yeah.
And how was that?
It was great.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's awesome.
So with him, and this was his first episode too. He was brought in to just do those two
Correct.
episodes.
Yeah.
So what was it like looking at the previous episodes? And for Cannibal, this is all about where Mike bites the ear off of, kind of leading up to that whole sequence where Mike bites the ear off of Holyfield during a very infamous fight.
Yeah.
What was it like knowing that there was a level of like historical integrity that you wanted to put into this, make sure that it was close as possible? What was the creative process trying to build those worlds?
Yeah, I mean, that was something that was very important to everybody, I think. But I know Director X and I were talking a lot in prep about accuracy. And the good thing with Tyson is that his whole life is on YouTube. I mean, we watched just hundreds of videos, interviews, recaps of fights, full fights, everything. It's all there. And so we were able to kind of to watch all these things and pace it out and figure out what happened when and how it followed up with this next beat and how to make sure that we were keeping that going, but knowing the style of the show and the way that the fights were being kind of done, which wasn't really watching a full round from start to end. It was a little more kind of bit by bit.
Yeah.
And, but then also understanding for that specific moment, of course, the ear bites is understanding how we wanted to kind of translate what was going on in his head at the time, because that was a huge part that was in the script, is like how he's seeing this. He's feeling like he's getting headbutted and these moments going into it and making sure that we were translating it correctly. So part of that for us was obviously where we were putting the camera, but shooting a lot of it on the Phantom so we could really slow down those moments and kind of get into his head and see in slow motion the way that he was probably feeling it, these moments happening, the headbutt coming in and the frustration that would happen and the retaliation and then the second headbutt and how he retaliated again.
Yeah.
So we just broke it down into piece by piece, but we watched all those fights and we watched all the history that we could and tried to make sure we were being truthful.
Yeah. I don't actually think I've ever watched that fight. Is it pretty like obvious that he bit off his ear, not only once, but twice?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think a lot of people forget that because I kind of forgot that. I remember seeing the fight as a kid, but I think a lot of people forget that there were actually two headbutts, two bites. Yeah.
And what is it like working with a character that is so interwoven in just the pop culture zeitgeist, knowing that, the film's built on this ego, this intensity, and it carries through the whole series. What is it like maintaining that? But even just compositionally, was there anything that you were given just in terms of like a rule book? We want to be able to show them in this, like head to toe a lot. Or is there anything that you were trying to play with to really just establish Mike compositionally?
We didn't have anything that was a rule book to follow. I think we wanted to show him as the big personality that he was, and I think a lot of that came naturally in where we put the camera, kind of keeping it low for a lot of it and just making his presence felt. And, we would, the way that we kind of set up every shot, X and I would we would shot list everything. We shot listed pretty much the whole episode, both episodes we did. And then on the day we would walk around with our phone and we would previs and just shoot it all and shoot all the angles before we would commit to them. And then we would look at the framing and punch in a little bit on our phone if we wanted. I often use a real viewfinder with a lens. And this time we were pretty much all just recording it with our phone so we could be on the same page.
Yeah.
And then once we kind of signed off on something, he could go do his thing, I could go do my thing, and we could set it up. But that was a great way to kind of get the visuals across. But the only thing that we really, I shouldn't say the only thing, one of the main things that I wanted to make sure we carried through from the beginning was the way that the camera moved. The camera was very kinetic, I felt, at the moving around a lot. Like, a scene with two people sitting here can often be just covered from 50-50 overs and overs. But in Mike, it would have started out in the hall and come rushing in and found us and come around. And so we wanted to make sure we could maintain that kind of energy and keep it going forward and just find these new elements and new ways that we could do it for our episodes.
Yeah, and you really felt that energy, especially. I think it was a party or some situation where Mike and the significant other that he ended up meeting, when you established her, Mike came into the room and the camera wrapped around them.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really like, it set the tone, but it also showed the presence of Mike.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's exactly what you were talking about, having that camera movement follow through from the first episode. And is that something that you tried to do through episode 8 and then concluding it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's awesome. And in terms for the fight sequences, that's choreographed, I'd love to know what the challenges were being able to shoot that. Have you ever done any type of scenes or sequences like that before?
I mean, I've done enough fight sequences for sure. I've done, I've done a lot of fights and some boxing stuff. But what I always try and do when I'm working with fights and stunt choreographers, stunt coordinators rather, is working together, finding out what strengths they think they can bring to it, talk to them about the angles that we're thinking and how we can kind of tweak things, or how we should tweak the camera to work for the angle, and just all come together. And I really try to make sure that I'm listening to what they need, because they're there for a reason. They know how to sell hits and do all that kind of stuff with the actors and work with them. So I want to make sure that I'm listening to that and then and can kind of contribute to it. Right. Or if I really need something, then we talk about it and they tweak it for us.
And you were saying that the tools that you use specifically to get those slow motion shots were the Phantom, but what was the camera package that you rolled out with?
So we were shooting everything on a mini LF, and we had the Cook full frame anamorphics. Is
that what the whole show used?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had K35s for a little bit, but I think pretty much 95% of what I did was on the Cooks.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
And how do you feel that the anamorphics really played into the story?
I thought they were great. It was actually my first time working with those lenses, and I loved them. And I actually ended up bringing them on to another show I did called Them, and we shot full frame, mini LF rather, and those full frame lenses.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And when you were trying to light these, historical events, were you going for a realistic approach of what it actually looked like during some of the fights, or when he was in his training setting, or did you get inspiration from somewhere else to be able to start planning that out?
Yeah, we kept that I didn't specifically try to recreate the exact look, which is generally a little more bright, flat. Yeah. And I kind of stayed away from that. It was toppy mostly, and we had, basically I just kind of had a big softbox like this over top that was much bigger, and then a bunch of par cans on trusses around, and I could pick which ones to have on and off. So I tried to keep the contrast where I could, but I definitely just try to make it nice and soft with stadium feeling, but I didn't try to keep it historical. And I think that was kind of the way that the first few episodes were as well.
Yeah. What were some of the fixtures that you deployed on this job?
Overall, I did a lot of the show I kind of approached a lot of it with this kind of top light idea of just kind of having soft top light where I could. So I didn't, so I did a lot of light mats. We'd glue them, we'd take them and we'd staple them in or screw them in or whatever to the ceiling above the actors, and we would just kind of try and hide them wherever I could. And it was really just about trying to make sure that they had these pools of light that they could walk into when we needed. And the rest of the time it was, we'd augment with things from outside the window, but I really tried to keep it contained that way rather than, lights right in their eyes.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure that their eyes caused a little bit of shadows and, kept a little moody that way.
Yeah. And was there any VFX that were using during any of the fight sequences? Were you doing any set extensions for the arena? How was some of that orchestrated?
Yeah, basically all of the deep crowd was VFX. So we were heavy COVID restrictions at the time of shooting, so I think we could only have 120 people or something like that for background at a time. So we would place them where we needed when we do close-ups of Don King and the crowd and all the people around him. But otherwise, it was just we relied on CG elements back there. So we had, you could see stuff that we couldn't shoot. We had the crane base back there, and they'd just be like, "Don't worry, we're racing in," and putting it out of there. So That's why we could just kind of keep rolling 360 on the ring. And
yeah. And what does some of the prep work look like when you're working with the VFX team? For some of our members or audience that wants to be able to do more work like that, shoot on a larger stage, knowing that they might have to do like set extensions, what does it look like for the cinematographer to prep leading into a shoot day?
I think for me, on this one, it was really about just being as open book with the VFX team as we could, to know what we were doing, what everyone wanted, what the ultimate goal would be, where the project, what the shot was going to look like at the end, and make sure that I could provide them with enough detail there that they needed to be able to cut them out properly or anything along those lines. And that's really, for visual effects in general, that's really what I try to do, is make sure that I have a deep understanding of what they need.
Yeah.
And then I make sure that they understand what I need and what I'm intending, and the colors and things that we're using, so that that it's as seamless as possible. Because if they get to, I see it sometimes where it feels like there's one idea being done on the day, and then in post, 6 months later, another idea comes out, and it never fully integrates properly. And so the more that we can all be together on the same page, then that just makes everyone's final job better. And so I don't want to be the person that's saying something strict on the day, like, no, I'm not going to do it that way. You got to figure it out. And then they can't. And now the shot looks bad.
Right. Yeah, that has to be hard to orchestrate. I've never been in a situation like that myself, but what happens if you feel like it's not coming together? Is there anything that a cinematographer can do to help navigate that with the VFX team, saying, listen, I don't think that this is going to quite work out in the way that you think it is? Is there a way to properly approach that?
Definitely. I think you just have to know what it is that you're pinpointing, and you have to know what the solution is. If you're going into something saying that there's a problem, you don't think it's going to work, and they say, well, what is? And you say, I don't know, then you did nothing. But like if you go in, and that's anything in film, right? Like if you go up to someone, a director or anyone with an idea, and you're like, or with a comment like, oh, this shot's not quite, I don't know, I think we could do this better. And they're like, well, what is it? I'm like, I don't know. It's not gonna help. So anything like that, just know what it is, visualize it. You got to be able to visualize everything. That's what I try to do. It's like, if I'm feeling something's not right, take a moment to yourself, think about what it is that's bugging you, and then think about what it would look like in your mind better, or how you can make it look better, and then translate that to people. And the more people can understand the way you're saying it, then the better.
That's awesome.
And then always, get your director on board, because if your director sees it that way, if your director doesn't see it that way, and he or she is the one that's sitting in post for 6 months later, if it's on a film, and they wanted something else, then it's not going to be what you wanted anyway. So you have to get on board with everybody.
And when it was for the ear biting, I'm assuming there's a level of VFX that goes into that. How was that orchestrated with the Phantom and being able to, what I loved about it is it worked seamlessly. It didn't feel clunky at times, speed ramping, with the frame rate and everything. How was that pulled off, and how did you guys plan for that sequence?
We shot all of that, pretty much all of the intimate moments, the moments where the camera was in there with them. We shot handheld on a Phantom, and we just knew every beat that we needed. We kind of shot listed that down, like the look up, and we want to see like the head come up into the chin for the headbutt, or into the eye for the headbutt. We want to capture all those moments and really isolate it so that shot tells that story. And so we would set it up, and we would find it and get the actors to do it, make sure it was working, and then just execute it that way, and make sure that when we would watch it back, and we had playback on that, so we would watch it and just make sure it was working. And if it wasn't, we would tweak it and redo it. And we kind of shot all of those little headbutts and all those little looks and those moments there, we shot by shot. It wasn't like we just rolled the whole fight in there. We just kind of, because a Phantom only rolls for, whatever it is, 15 seconds or something like that. So we just do these bursts, but we just got that one angle, worked it out, burst, get it, and then move on to the next. And that was actually a great way to get it to really feel as put together as it did. I feel like if we shot it on, say, the Mini, and we were just rolling, it wouldn't have had the same effect.
And what was the inspiration behind that perspective?
To try and get into Tyson's head, I think.
Yeah.
You know, as much as possible to make sure that it was understood from him. Mm-hmm. Because in the end, like afterwards, what happens is, you know, you hear his frustrations about it. He's like, he felt like the victim. That's the way that we told the story, at least. He felt like the victim. He felt like, you know, he was headbutted unfairly twice, and that they weren't on him for it. They weren't, like, the refs weren't doing anything about it. He felt like he was. So we wanted to make, so that means it was very personal to him, you know, and he was really noticing all these things and all these moments. And he felt betrayed by all of it. So we wanted to make sure that what we were capturing was really personal to him, not to Holyfield.
And when you guys were shooting it, did you know that the voiceover was going to be there helping to like navigate that fight?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I really liked, is the way that it just told that story. You know, you said it's very, the series is very like vignette based, where you're going from one time period, from one event to the next, and then you're in something like this where you're only seeing the fight for, I mean, maybe on screen for what, like 2-3 minutes the fight plays out. And the way the narration helps navigate that, there's the parts where you have to break the fourth wall. It was very seamlessly put together. Was the script always that way, or is that something that you and Director X tried to like put together yourselves?
I think the script was always that way. It was always written with his voiceover in there, and it was always, they were very tight. You know, the scripts are very tight.
Yeah. And what were some of the challenges just from this shoot? Was there anything that you walked into that you weren't quite expecting, or was the overall like shoot pretty straightforward?
I mean, the overall shoot was straightforward to an extent. I mean, we had our challenges. We were in the height of COVID, so we had crews going down and things like that we had to deal with. But we had a great production team that kind of kept the ball rolling, and I'm sure they dealt with a lot more than I got to know. But you know, we lost locations and had to move. Like we were based in New Orleans, but then we ended up doing a week in Alabama, and that was because we lost the center that we were going to do the arena that we were going to do the fight at. So our producer Jason Roberts knew of a place that he had just shot at in Mobile, Alabama. So we went out there, and you know, but you just got to roll with it, like everything. Like every show has something. I've never been on a show that hasn't had issues, and hopefully one day I can. But I think every show has its thing, and and the part of it is that we have great minds coming together. We have talented people. We have, and it's just a machine that we can overcome these things if we think clearly on it.
And what advice would you have for a cinematographer that might be entering a show where they didn't shoot the pilot episode and they have to prep to be able to match a look? What is some of the advice that you could give them to just be able to tackle that?
I would say I can speak on that from both sides. And it's really about watching everything that's been done, going through the stills if it hasn't been cut together yet, going through the stills, going through the edits as you can, understanding the idea, and have conversations with everybody, the showrunner and the DP who started it. That's something that I did. I called up Isaiah and we talked for however long, an hour, and just talked everything. Talked about lenses, talked about ideas, talked about working with the cast, and just everything, you know, and just had an open conversation just to kind of understand as much as I could going into it.
Do the DPs ever come to set just to check in or anything like that, or is it typically just on your shoulders to pull it off? Is there anybody there that makes sure that there's any, you know, the scripty or any type of just coherency across the board?
On this, no.
Yeah.
There can be. It depends on the show. If you're on a show that's alternating, you know, and it's ongoing, and like when I did Riverdale, that's what it was. Oh, well, Riverdale I did every episode on season 2, but then when I got into the next one, it was that. It was alternating. So, yeah, you're around. The other DPs are around. Script supervisor could be there. The script supervisor wouldn't say anything about the look or anything, but they'd be there to answer questions if we did this before, or if that's accurate to how it was shot last time.
Yeah.
But usually no. I think it's really on you as a cinematographer to make sure that you understand what was done, and to make sure that you're working that and working with that in mind, and being honest with it.
Absolutely.
Because And you can have, the showrunner will let you know they should.
Yeah.
And you don't want to get to that point. You don't want to have that conversation because that means that
you're not doing your job.
You're probably not doing your job.
Yeah. Considering this nomination, is there anything that you're really proud of with Mike? Is there a certain scene, shot, something that you're like, wow, I pulled this off, and now you're getting the recognition for it?
When I read the script and found out that it was the Evander fight, that was exciting. So I was just happy that we got to do that and highlight that moment in Tyson's life. And, I think we pulled it off. I really like the way that it kind of cut together, and I'm happy with what we did. And I'm really happy with the collaboration with X. So yeah, I mean, the whole episode, the whole series had a lot going for it that I was excited about. So I was just happy to be part of it.